Chapter 5. Education System, Literature, Art and Architecture. Reading Objectives. Education under British Rule. Modern Education. Wood's Dispatch. National Education. Development of Literature, Art, Architecture. Case Study. First, Baroda University. Case Study. Second, Architecture of Chennai. The establishment of the British rule affected the education system in India. The British government did not recognize the traditional education system. Ultimately, the educated Indians became teachers and stepped forward to teach the masses. India has a long history of organized education. The Gurukul system of education is one of the oldest on the earth, but before that the Guru Shishya system was extant, in which students were taught orally and the data would be passed from one generation to the next. Gurukuls were traditional Hindu residential schools of learning, typically the teacher's house or a monastery. Education was free, and often limited to the higher castes, but students from well-to-do families paid Guru Dakshina, a voluntary contribution after the completion of their studies. At the Gurukuls, the teacher imparted knowledge of religion, scriptures, philosophy, literature, warfare, statecraft, medicine, astrology and history, itihas, actually mythology. Only students belonging to Brahman and Kshatriya communities were taught in these Gurukuls. However, the advent of Buddhism and Jainism brought fundamental changes in access to education with democratic character. The first millennium and the few centuries preceding it saw the flourishing of higher education at Nalanda, Takshashila, Ujjain and Vikramshila universities. Art, architecture, painting, logic, grammar, philosophy, astronomy, literature, Buddhism, Arthashastra, economics and politics, law, and medicine were among the subjects taught, and each university specialized in a particular field of study. Takshashila specialized in the study of medicine, while Ujjain laid emphasis on astronomy. Nalanda, being the biggest center, handled all branches of knowledge, and housed up to 10,000 students at its peak. Traditional structures were not recognized by the British government and have been on the decline since. Mahatma Gandhi is said to have described the traditional educational system as a beautiful tree that was destroyed during the British rule. Enrich yourself. Wood's Dispatch of 1854. The British government declared the Wood's Dispatch of 1854, a program to develop education in India. Its provisions included, as stated by Charles Wood, were 1. Primary to university level education to be provided, for which Calcutta, Bombay and Madras had universities set up in 1857. 2. Departments of education were to function in various provinces to look after proper methods of education, and money provided for it was to be utilized well. 3. Teacher training schools were set up all over India. Education under British rule. British records show that indigenous education was widespread in the 18th century, with a school for every temple, mosque or village in most regions of the country. The subjects taught included reading, writing, arithmetic, theology, law, astronomy, metaphysics, ethics, medical science and religion. The schools were attended by students representing of all classes of society. But scholars have questioned the validity of such an argument. They argue that proponents of indigenous education fail to recognize the importance of the widespread use of printed books in the West since the 16th century, which led to a remarkable advancement of knowledge. Printed books were not used in Indian schools till the 1820s or even later. There were institutions such as Gresham College in London that encouraged scientific learning. In fact, there were a number of such academic and scientific societies in England, often supported by Puritan and non-conformist merchants, the like of which probably did not exist in India. The entire claim of indigenous education proponents is based on the thesis advocated by Dharampal, which says that there was a general decline in Indian society and economy with the coming of British rule. In the process, indigenous education suffered. Charter Act 1813, Orientalists and Anglicists. Charter Act of 1813 declared that 1 lakh rupee would be spent on education, but the medium of education and methodology was not decided upon. This meager sum remained unspent for many years. A controversy arose between two groups called the Anglicists and the Orientalists about the question of how the funds should be used. The Anglicists, led by Lord Macaulay, advocated Western studies, Western science, philosophy and literature in English medium. As a result, the different objectives of the Orientalists and Anglicists sparked a ceremonial debate as to what kind of education English or classical Indian should be funded in the country. Macaulay's Minute. In India 1834, Thomas Babington Macaulay, also known as Lord Macaulay, advocated to introduce the European system of education. He argued his case in his Minute on Indian education. Governor-General William Bentinck agreed with Macaulay's Minute on Indian education and wrote, "The great object of the British government ought to be promotion of European literature and science among the natives of India." Lord Macaulay's system of education came into being in 1854, although with several revisions. School and university textbooks explain Macaulay as a slaver who wanted to produce a new generation of English-speaking Indians loyal to the British Crown to act as an army of clerks. No Indian textbook, however, ever offered the text of Macaulay's Minute on Indian education to students and general public. Reproduced is the unedited version of Lord Macaulay's Minute on Indian education. The British established many colleges such as St. Xavier College, Sydenham College, Wilson College and Elphinstone College in India. Get to know more. It is impossible for us, with our limited means, to attempt to educate the body of the people. We must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals and in intellect. To that class we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the counting, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from the Western nomenclature and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. Lord Macaulay. The defects in modern education system. The British had not introduced modern education to benefit the Indians. Even here they had planned to gain some educated Indians who would support British thoughts and causes to further strengthen their hold over the nation. A low-salaried, educated clerical staff for the officers would save money and efforts at calling English officers from England. Further, educated Indians would prefer British goods and profits would pour in. The defects. The modern education system had many flaws. 1. It relegated mass education to the back burner. Number of primary schools was less. 2. The British wanted to educate the elite classes and expected them to teach those in lower classes, so the British never taught the poor or low castes. 3. Girls' education got no attention. Technical and scientific knowledge was not given at all, so most of the Indians still remained uneducated. 4. British education system did not fit social and mental conditions of the people in India. Whatever small changes were carried out were only when the educated Indians became teachers. Do you know, in 1830, the British had made English compulsory for government jobs and Muslims did not want to lose this. The efforts and dreams of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Hidayatullah Khan and other Muslim reformers led to the founding of Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, Mao College, in Aligarh in 1857. Hidayatullah Khan, the main force behind the college, wanted to present balanced education with Islamic views, values and British education working together. So both the Muslim reformers wanted to provide modern education without compromising their Islamic background. Gradually the college turned into a full-fledged university called Aligarh Muslim University. Birth of national education system. The Indians who had received modern, Western education saw all the flaws in the new educational methods. Rabindranath Tagore and Raja Ram Mohan Roy were some of the educated Indians. In 1906, the National Council of Education was founded in Calcutta. The Bengal National College and School started its working career since August 15, with Arbindo Ghosh as its first principal and Satish Chandra Mukherjee as its first executive head or the superintendent. Vishwabharati University was set up by Rabindranath Tagore at Shanti Niketan, which also encouraged art and culture other than the usual subjects. Night-Talim Schools of Mahatma Gandhi and Asiatic Society by William Jones, 1784, Calcutta, laid stress on studying rich cultural and historical heritage of India. Through these acts, Indians learned how great a civilization had been their ancestors, which was then the European historical heritage. This encouraged Indians to gain pride in their nationality and soon patriotism followed. Leaders like G.K. Gokhale came onto the scene to eradicate illiteracy and ignorance from Indian minds, so he and some other educational reformers insisted on providing free and compulsory education to children, especially between 6 to 10 years of age. But the British government took no firm steps in this direction. India gained freedom in 1947 and it was observed that only 7% of females and 24% of males in India could actually read and write, others were illiterates. Post-independence situation. After independence, education became the responsibility of the states. The central government's only obligation was to coordinate in technical and higher education and specify standards. This continued till 1976, when the education became a joint responsibility of the state and the center. Education in science. Educational and social reformers, like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, realized that science was vital to expand knowledge and gain progress in all spheres. For this, it was necessary that all students in India know English as a language, as science was taught in English in those times. Even the traditional Indian education system had never touched upon science much. The reformers knew that India was lagging behind all other countries as the Indians had no scientific knowledge. Thus many organizations emerged to make science easy and popular. Early 19th century saw modern science emerging in India. The national universities saw many Indians enrolling for science classes. Many of these students further contributed greatly to science. But they had to leave behind their superstitions. Many things were considered sinful due to ignorance. Such views were discarded by those who wanted to pursue science. The Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science was founded by Mahendralal Sarkar to encourage people to study science. The Indian Science Congress Education set up in the 1920s called sessions all over India where scientists put forward their ideas and shared the views. After the popularity of science in India, many Indian scientists, like C.V. Raman, P.C. Ray, J.C. Bose, Satyan Bose, D.N. Wadia, Birbal Sahni and Meghnad Sinha came on the scene. In 1930, C.V. Raman even received the Nobel Prize for Physics. Statistics was popularized in India by the efforts of P.C. Mahalanobis. S. Ramanujan contributed to enriching the field of mathematics. S. Vishweshwarya was the greatest in the field of engineering and technology in India. He contributed construction of dams, hydroelectric projects, sericulture and overall technical knowledge. Thus, scientific knowledge enlightened Indian population. Fact 1. The system of education is one of the oldest on the earth. 2. Books were not used in Indian school. 3. As the first law member introduced English system of education. Developments in literature, art and architecture. Development of literature. The Indian literary tradition was primarily one of verse and was also essentially oral. The earliest works were composed to be sung or recited, and were so transmitted for many generations before being written down. As a result, the earliest records of a text got delayed by several centuries than the conjectured date of its composition. Furthermore, perhaps because so much Indian literature is either religious or a reworking of familiar stories from the Sanskrit epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the mythological writings known as Puranas, the authors often remain anonymous. Biographical details of the lives of most of the earlier Indian writers exist only in much later stories and legends. In medieval Indian literature, the earliest works in many of the languages were sectarian, designed to advance or to celebrate some unorthodox regional belief. Examples are the Kayapadas in Bengali, Tantric verses of the 12th century in the Lalikaritra, circa 1280, in Marathi. Other example was in Rajasthani of the bardic tales of chivalry and heroic resistance to the first Muslim invasions, such as the 12th century epic poem Prithviraj Raso by Chand Bardai of Lahore. During the same period, the Bhakti movement was founded in South India. The most famous Shiva Bhakta skulls were the four Nalwar Bhakti was also addressed to Rama, an avatar of Vishnu, most notably in the Awadhi, Eastern Hindi, works of Tulsidas, his Ramcharitmanas, Tale of the Acts of Rama, 1574-77, trans. 1952, has become the authoritative. The early gurus or founders of the Sikh religion, especially Guru Nanak and Guru Arjan, composed bhakti hymns to their concepts of deity. These are the first written documents in Punjabi, and form part of the Adi Granth, first, or original book, the sacred scripture of the Sikhs, which was first compiled by Guru Arjan in 1604. The domination of the British on India had a lot of socio-economic impact, and literature was not far behind. The advent of the printing press revolutionized literature as it reached out to the masses. The Bengal Gazette was the first newspaper to come out, beginning a new genre. Schools were established to further English education and vernacular languages as well. Indians were writing in English for the first time and putting across their views to the world. Even authors, like Rabindranath Tagore, wrote prolific literature during this period. It also won him the title of Novel Laureate. Notable among them are Prem Chand, one of the foremost figures of modern Indian literature. He inducted realism into the Hindi literature and talked about the struggles of the downtrodden classes with rare sensitivity, which was an uncommon thing in the early 20th century Indian literature. Sarachandra Chattopadhyay, Agaya, Nirmal Verma, Mahadevi Verma, Sunil Gangopadhyay, U.R. Ananthamurthy, Amrita Pritam, Ismat Chatti, Kafi Azmi, R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand, O.V. Vijayan, Indira Goswami, Buddhadev Basu, etc. Developments in music and dance, theatre and films. Music dance. Madras was an important centre for Carnatic music in South India from 1857 to 1947. Talented musicians, like Pandit Vishnu Digambar Paluskar and Chaturpandati Vishnu Narayan Bhatkande, tried to revive Hindustani music which had become a part of our past. Technological advancement introduced recorded music to India. Due to this advancement, popular Hindi film music reached the homes of the masses. Many Western musical instruments, like violin, saxophone and piano, were introduced into Indian music scene. Mysore court in Karnataka patronized Carnatic music and musicians. Musicians could showcase their talent in the Mysore court on festivals, like Dussehra. Dance is a highly developed art form in India and just as important pastime in worship, and as part of the Sanskrit dramas. The great classical dance forms are Bharatanatyam, Kathak and Manipuri, Kathakali. Bharatanatyam, which is based on the Natya Shastra, is probably the most important of these forms. It contains many of the exact movements, gestures and facial expressions that Indian dance is famous for. Every movement and gesture the dancer performs has its own significance. Get to know more. Kathak dance style originated in North India and stresses rhythmic footwork, under the weight of more than 100 ankle injury bells, and spectacular spins. The Manipuri dance form, which is named after Manipur, where it comes from, is known for its elegant turning and swaying. Kathakali dance drama is characterized by the mime and mask-like makeup on the face. Theatre and film. India has had a distinguished theatrical tradition for more than 1,000 years. The Gupta era saw the flowering of Sanskrit drama. The great plays that survived from that time are generally secular, such as Shakuntala by Kalidasa, about the court, kings, and courtesans. Classical plays are rarely revived, although modern playwrights have experimented with traditional mythic and historical themes. Theatre other than folk theatre, which struggles despite government patronage to survive, is directly from the European tradition and is popular only in Kolkata. Theatre has been eclipsed by the cinema and more recently by television. India produces more films annually than any other country. The audience, despite the spread of televisions and videocassette recorders, is still enormous. Popular films are generally written to a formula and are often embellished with songs and dance routines. Film themes vary from historical and religious to social. Rich boy meets girl. Twins separated at birth become policeman and criminal. Boy sacrifices his love for a girl to patriotic duty or to the desires of parents, who wish him to marry another. Popular cinema rarely has realistic settings or plots, and imitations or Western films are common. Indian film is a significant cultural export to Central Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Enrich yourself. The printing in India. Printing technology came to India in 1556. It was the Jesuit priests who brought this technology to our country. The first book printed in India was in Portuguese language in Old Goa. It was Doctrina Christao by Saint Francis Xavier. Calcutta was the place where the first newspaper was published for India. It was a Britisher who started the first newspaper in our country. On January 29, 1780, James Augustus Hickey launched the Bengal Gazette. It has another title, Calcutta Advertiser. It was popularly known as Hickey's Gazette. The first issue of the paper had 2 pages and later it was increased to 4 pages. Its size was 35 centimeters times 24 centimeters. Inspired by these great leaders, many newspapers were started in different parts of the country. All this led to a boom in the newspaper industry in India. Some of the leading English newspapers were also launched during this time. The Times of India, 1861, was started as a paper supporting the British. Royal patronage of various art forms had declined, but some creations of those times still survived. Nawab Wajid Ali Shah of Awadh had appointed a British painter Tilly Kettle to paint his portraits. Instances like this caused Indian painting style to be influenced by European painting styles. Many of the European styles of painting came to be taught in reputed art schools. Various cities, like Calcutta, Bombay and Madras had academies which were opened in the 1850s to teach painting. One such academy was established even in Lahore. In course of time, besides Indian royals, the British officials in India also wanted to have their portraits painted. Some even wished to have paintings of natives and monuments painted for themselves. One of the popular painters of this time was Sevak Rani, who painted no subjects of various festive ceremonies which were bought as collectibles by Lord Minto and Lord Amherst. Rabindranath Tagore was an India painter who preferred to paint in the classical Indian style of painting. This school of painting developed as the Bengal School of Art. In the south, Raja Ravi Verma gained popularity as painter of scenes from Indian epics. The Western painting style had left an impact on Indian arts and artists. One such artist who painted in the later years of the British regime was Amrita Shergill. She chose the common events of daily life as her painting subjects. Soon Nandlal Bose arrived on the scene, whose paintings depicted the daily chores of craftspersons. Soon the painters LSO got involved in the national movement for freedom. Do you know, in the 19th century, when photography reached, Indians were drawn to it as a medium of expressing views and ideas. Soon Lala Deen Dayal became a well-known name in the field of photography. He was honored as the court photographer for Lord Curzon. Architecture. For many centuries, Indian architecture, sculpture, and painting developed many different styles, based on religious, cultural and regional influences. For instance, Buddhist traditions led to stupas, or burial mounds of earth and stone, built in the 3rd century BC. The oldest architectural remains in India are buildings of burnt brick found at Mohenjo-daro in Harappa, now in Pakistan, dating from about 2500 to 1750 BC. The subsequent Vedic period, which precedes the beginning of historical styles, is represented by burial mounds at Loria Nandangarh, in Bihar state, and rock-cut tombs in Malabar, Kerala state. The best example of these structures commemorative of the death and entering into nirvana of Buddha, is the Great Stupa in Sanchi in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Buddhism wanted after the 5th century as Hinduism and Jainism became dominant. The Jains often built on a gigantic scale, a marked feature being pointed domes constructed of level courses of cobblestones. Extensive remains have been discovered on hilltops far removed from one another in 3 states, at Parasnath Hill in Bihar, Abu in Rajasthan, and Satrunjay in Gujarat. The Hindu style is closely related to the Jain style. It is divided into 3 general categories: Northern, from AD 600 to the present, Central from 1000 to 1300 AD, and Southern or Dravidian, from 1350 to 1750. In all 3 periods, the style is marked by great ornateness and the use of pyramidal roofs. Spire-like domes terminate in delicate finials. Other features include the elaborate, grand-scale gopuras, or gates, and the chaltaries, or ceremonial halls. Among the most famous examples of the style are the temples in the south at Belur, and at Helbid, Tiruvallur, Thanjavur, and Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu state, temples in the north at Baroli in Rajasthan, at Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh, and at Konark the Sun Temple in Orissa, Odisha, state. Islamic architecture in India dates from the 13th century to the present. Islam introduced to India the dome, the true arch, geometric motifs, mosaics, and minarets. Despite fundamental conceptual differences, Indian and Islamic architecture achieved a harmonious fusion, especially in certain regional styles. Indo-Islamic style is usually divided into 3 phases: the Pashtun, the provincial, and the Mughal. Examples of the earlier Pashtun style in stone are at Ahmedabad in Gujarat state, and in brick at Gaurpandwa in West Bengal state. These structures are closely allied to Hindu models, but are simpler and lack sculptures of human figures. The dome, the arch, and the minaret are constant features of the style. A famous monument in this style is the Mausoleum Gol Gumbaz, 17th century, in Bijapur, Karnataka state, which has a dome with a 43 meters, 142 feet diameter, almost as big as that of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Another notable structure is the 5-story stone and marble tower called the Qutub Minar, 12th century, in Delhi. Building in India since the 18th century has either carried on the indigenous historical forms or has seen patterned after European models introduced by the British. Numerous examples of Western styles of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries may be seen in public buildings, factories, hotels, and houses. The most outstanding example of modern architecture in India is the city of Chandigarh, the joint capital of Haryana and Punjab. The city was designed by the Swiss-born French architect Le Corbusier in collaboration with Indian architects. Case Study 1. Baroda University, Baroda. The Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda has been named after Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad III. He was ruler who was patron of art, culture and education. He established this university in the view that it would provide education to millions of aspiring candidates. Be the largest university in the city. The Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda is also known as MS University. It is one of the most reputed institutions of the city, which is well known for its fine arts, technology and engineering and science faculty. This college was initially known as the Baroda College of Science, which was founded in the year 1881. Later on, it got converted into a university. This educational institution is the sole university in Gujarat where the medium of instruction is English. Before 1871, the Baroda state did not have a single government school. In 1882, the Baroda College took its first 33 students. In 1891, an order was passed that each village had to maintain a schoolmaster. In 1907, primary education was made free and compulsory for boys aged 7 to 12 and girls aged 7 to 10. By 1945, over 3 lakhs children were attending the 2,614 schools run by the state. In Baroda city, in 1891 there was 21% literacy compared to 24% in Bombay city. By 1931, there had been a complete reversal. In Bombay city, it was 24% as compared to 41% in Baroda city. The present university began functioning only in 1948, but in 1881 the Maharaja had laid the foundation of Baroda College that developed into this university. Today Baroda University attracts students from India and abroad to receive quality education in fine arts, engineering and technology. The university is the only one in Gujarat that teaches in English medium. 2. Different pattern of architecture in Chennai. The origin of Madras as we know it dates back to a few centuries, about 350 years. Prior to that, small villages existed for well over 1,000 years in a cluster of civilization. Villages around temples, like Parthasarathi in Triplicane and Kapalishwara temple in Mylapore near the southern coast and Marudhishwara temple in Thiruvanmiyur were in existence for several centuries long before the Europeans arrived here. The first Europeans to reach the shores of Madras were, as usual in this part of the world, Portuguese. They built a church in St. Thomas Mount enshrining the Bleeding Cross. And then they went further down to Little Mount where they built another small church in 1551 where St. Thomas, the disciple of Jesus Christ, was hiding in a cave from his persecutors before being martyred in St. Thomas Mount. One Francis Day, a member of the Masulipatam Council, undertook a journey down the east coast of South India looking for a promising place. He found one near Punamali, ruled by one Damarla Venkatapati Nayak, a local chieftain. He had chosen a village called as Madraspatnam. The fort built by Francis Day was called as Fort St. George as it was finished at the festival of St. George the 23rd of April 1653. The people of Madras are zealous guardians of Tamil culture, which they regard as inherently superior to the hybridized cultures further north. They have, for instance, been among the most vociferous opponents of Hindi being made the national language. Although the city has long been important for textile manufacturing, a great deal of industrial expansion including car assembly plants, railway coach and truck works, engineering plants, film studios, computer software development and educational institutes has taken place in recent years. Madras prides in having the second longest beach in the world. Monuments. As you all know, every building has its own history and likewise the public buildings built by the British in Chennai city has now become historical monuments worthy of study. Since it has survived for 100 years, it has good claim to be called historical monument. Kamraj Memorial House. Kamraj Memorial House is dedicated to a famous politician and the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Shri M. G. Ramchandran Kamraj. Fort St. George. built by the British East India Company under the supervision of Francis Day and Andrew Corgan in 1640 AD. The Fort St. George now has church dedicated to Saint Mary and a fort museum. Today, it is the Secretariat and Legislative Assembly of the state. San Tome Basilica. San Tome Basilica at the south end of Marianne Beach was named after Saint Thomas, Doubting Thomas. It is believed that he had come to Chennai in AD 52 and was killed at St. Thomas Mount just outside the city in AD 78. Built in 16th century by the Portuguese, in 1896, it was made a basilica. The beautiful stained glass window at the basilica portrays the story of Saint Thomas, and the central hall has 14 wooden plaques depicting scenes from the last days of Christ. In the cathedral in a 3 feet high statue of Virgin Mary believed to have been brought from Portugal in 1543. High Court Building. Built in 1892, this red Indo-Saracenic structure at Paris Corner is Chennai's main landmark. It is believed to be one of the largest judicial buildings in the world. Freemasons' Hall stands as an elegant architectural monument in the Egmore region of Chennai. Freemasonry is the largest fraternal order that exists in the world. The society, Freemasons, is believed to have its origins in the European continent, somewhat during the 17th century AD. Senate House, one of the Chennai's most impressive architectural marvels. Senate House, at the Chennai University campus on the Marina, was constructed in 1873 under the supervision of Robert Flower Chisholm, one of the greatest architects of the 19th century. The entire structure is a harmonious blend of Indo-Saracenic style, with Byzantine architectural features. The Senate House has a central hall on the ground floor, 130 feet long, 58 feet broad and 54 feet high, with the corridors supported by 6 massive stone pillars on either side. The stone arches between the pillars, with the 4 towers rising high at the corners of the building, surmounted by exquisitely shaped domes, painting in different colors, give the building a grandeur that is difficult to match. Word to know. Modern education spread in India due to the Charter Act of 1813 and the Woods Dispatch of 1854. British education provided well-educated, low-salaried clerical staff to the British. British education system did not fit social and mental conditions of the people in India. Early 19th century saw modern science emerging in India. The Mao College was the first educational institution with residential facilities. Soon it turned out well-educated Muslims. Girls' education, scientific and technical knowledge and mass education received no attention. Educational reformers, like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, William Jones and G.K. Gokhale aided in spreading mass education. Newspapers in India were started and owned by many British, but soon newspapers and journals were founded by social reformers and national leaders. After independence, modern architects were invited to India. Architects sought to revive old Indian styles.